So we're entering the stomach. So what happens in the stomach is pretty cool. So we have mechanical digestion and chemical digestion of protein and fat. Okay, so the stomach actually has 3 muscle walls, and I think I have this on the next slide, but it's got a circular muscle, an oblique muscle, and longitudinal muscle. So it's got 3 layers, so it's really strong. Okay, now, so it's going to be able to macerate and mix the food really good. Okay, it's going to start the chemical digestion of protein and of fat. Okay, but it's important to realize that the stomach doesn't absorb any nutrients. Okay, so that's why they can do a gastric bypass and not have any problems with absorption. Okay, it does absorb aspirin, some other lipid-soluble drugs, and alcohol. Okay, it gets its nerves, so it has parasympathetic fibers coming from the vagus nerve, and then sympathetic fibers coming from the celiac plexus. Okay, now another important thing is that all the blood that is drained from the stomach is going to go through the liver before it's returned to the heart. So it's going to be cleaned up when it leaves the liver before it goes to the heart. Okay, now let's see what's happening. Okay, now stomach wall. Okay, so the stomach wall, like I just said, okay, so it's got muscularis, which has three layers. So it has a longitudinal layer, a circular layer, and then an oblique layer. Okay, it has specialized pits in it that they call gastric pits, and we're going to talk about the cells in there in a minute. Okay, so there's the gastric pits. Okay, and that's in the mucosa. Okay, so it's got a simple columnar epithelium, it's got the lamina propria, muscularis mucosa, okay, submucosa, which is the areolar tissue with all the blood vessels and nerves, and then the muscles. Okay, now the cells that are in here. Okay, so there are surface cells, and what they're going to do is surface mucus cells. They're going to secrete mucus that's alkaline, and that's going to help combat the acidity of the stomach. Okay, now it has mucus neck cells, and what they do is they produce acidic mucus. Okay, so now the mucus from both of these are going to lubricate the stomach so that when the food, the bolus enters it, it's going to protect it from injury. Okay, now these are the ones that are really important. Okay, now parietal cells secrete hydrochloric acid. So you could think of like an acid parent. Okay, so parietal cells secrete hydrochloric acid, and they also secrete intrinsic factor. Okay, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. Chief cells, okay, they secrete chymosin and lipase when you're a baby, okay, which is going to do protein breakdown and fat breakdown. But as we're a grown-up, okay, they're going to secrete pepsinogen. Okay, and pepsinogen, okay, so remember the O-gen. Okay, so O-gen is a precursor to an active protein. It becomes pepsin, and the pepsin's going to break down protein. Okay, now there are also enteroendocrine cells in here, and they're going to secrete gastrin, which is a hormone, and then some other messengers that we're not going to worry about too much. Okay, now let me go up here. Okay, now I have more details about gastric secretions. Okay, so hydrochloric acid, we abbreviate that HCl, and you guys know that by now. Okay, why is it important? One of the things that it's going to do is it's going to activate pepsinogen. Okay, so it's going to activate pepsinogen, and it's going to make it pepsin. And pepsin is going to digest proteins. Okay, it also activates lingual lipase. So this is a fat-digesting enzyme. Okay, so hydrochloric acid is very acidic. Okay, so stomach pH is between 2 and 4. Okay, so it can break up connective tissue that you ingest. Okay, so you could think about like if you eat steak or you eat a chicken leg or something, there's connective tissue in there. So you need to be able to break it apart. So the hydrochloric acid helps do that, and it'll help break down plant cell walls. Okay, it's also going to convert ferric ions to ferrous ions, and this is the type of iron that we can absorb. Okay, because this pH is so low, it can also break down, destroy any bacteria or pathogens that we eat. Okay, the second thing, which is the only essential function of the stomach, is the production of intrinsic factor. Okay, so intrinsic factor is essential for B12 to be absorbed by the small intestine. So you can take all the B12 you want, but if you don't have any intrinsic factor, it's just going to go through and end up in your urine or your feces. Okay, so it has to bind to the intrinsic factor in order to get absorbed. Okay, so B12 is necessary for red blood cell production. So without intrinsic factor and B12, you can wind up with what's called pernicious anemia. I'm trying to think. So sometimes when they do gastric bypass, the intrinsic factor will number will go down if they, remove the surface area of the stomach. So then you'll have to do B12 injections. Okay, now pepsin. Pepsin is for protein digestion. Okay, it's secreted as pepsinogen, which is the inactive form of it. Okay, all of these inactive protein digesting enzymes are called zymogens. Okay, so zymogen, that's a whole group of inactive. I'm having problems with the stylus today. I'm getting frustrated. Oh, here's this. Let me try this one. Inactive. This one's worse. Inactive proteases. Maybe it's not worse. Okay, so a protease is an enzyme that digests protein. Okay, so if you think about it, if you're made out of protein, okay, so your stomach is made out of a lot of protein, and you're releasing enzymes that can break down protein active, that could be bad. You could eat holes through your stomach. So all of our protein secreting enzymes are released in an inactive form. Okay, so pepsin is released as pepsinogen, and then when it comes in contact with the hydrochloric acid, it becomes pepsin. And then pepsin, it will activate more pepsinogen. Okay, now gastric lipase is breaks down the butterfat of milk, and this is mainly in infants. Okay, and then chymosin will curdle the milk and coagulate the proteins. And actually, we use a synthetic chymosin to make cheese. Okay, now let me try to move this out of the way again. Okay, now gastric motility. So the way that the stomach moves, there's two functions, and I think I hinted at this earlier. Okay, so I'm trying to find a better. So two functions. So one is to mix the bolus. Mix the bolus. Oh, I made it a pencil. I don't want it to be a pencil. I just want it to be... Okay, mix the bolus. I'm still on the pencil. Okay, let me try to figure out how to get the pen back. There's the pen. Okay. To mix the bolus. Now it's too fat. I'm getting frustrated. Mix the bolus with the gastric juice. Okay, so the gastric juice is all the stuff we just talked about on the last slide. So we mix the bolus, and that forms chyme. Okay, so chyme is the disgusting stuff that you could throw up. Okay, so chyme is a mixture of food, saliva, and gastric juices. Okay, now when it mixes, okay, it's mixing it up, and then we're also going to slowly let the chyme leave the stomach and go into the first part of the small intestines, which is called the duodenum. Okay, so let's go through gastric mixing and gastric emptying. Okay, so Contractions of the smooth muscle in the stomach wall. Okay, so the 3 layers that we have are going to be mixing this up. So we're pushing it back and forth. Okay, and that's forming chyme. Okay, now the peristaltic waves, okay, so remember peristalsis is when we're pushing something through, are going to force everything that's in here down towards the sphincter called the pyloric sphincter. Okay, so sphincters are just circular muscles that are going to control the exit of liquids or fluids. Okay, so we want to go down here, so the pyloric region. Okay, now what will happen is the pressure gradient, okay, is going to increase. It's going to force the pyloric sphincter to open, but the pyloric sphincter only lets a teeny tiny amount, so they say like 3 milliliters of chyme into the small intestines at a time. Okay, so we don't have a huge amount of gastric emptying. We don't just dump into our small intestines. We only let it in a little tiny bit at a time. And we do that so that we can have lots of absorption in the small intestines. Okay, so we want it to go through the small intestines slowly. We don't want it to get dumped in really, really fast. Okay, so now let's see. Okay, so now, oh, I got stuff everywhere. Okay, so 3 phases of gastric motility. So the first one is cephalic, so it's just in your head. You're starting to think about food. And what happens is your brain sends a message to the hypothalamus, to the medulla oblongata, and the vagus nerve tells the stomach to start secreting and moving around. So this is when your stomach growls. Okay, the second phase is called the gastric phase. And the gastric phase is after the bolus hits the stomach. Okay, the sphincter opens up and lets the food in. Gastrin is released. Okay, the baroreceptors in the stomach are going to detect stretch. The chemoreceptors will detect protein. The gastrin that's released will make the stomach contract more, and it'll make the stomach secrete more hydrochloric acid. Okay, the gastrin will actually keep the chyme in the stomach, so it keeps the pyloric sphincter closed. Okay, now the intestinal phase is all about intestinal reflex. Okay, so when it starts when the chyme that's really super acidic from the stomach enters the small intestines. So then the stomach stops contracting as much. Okay, and that's caused by CCK, which is cholecystokinin. Okay, and the stomach stops secreting, which is caused by secretin, and it slows down the emptying of the stomach. Okay, so it just slows it down, so it's just very slowly entering the small intestines. Okay, now let me see if I can get this up. I think, okay, now vomiting is the opposite, right, of all of this. So vomiting can be caused by the stomach stretching too much, a psychological stimuli, if you see something really gross and you just start throwing up, or a smell, or it could be cut from a chemical irritant. So if you have food poisoning, there could be something in there. Okay, so you have an emetic center. So if you think about emesis basin, that's the little thing they give you in the hospital to throw up in. Okay, so the emetic center in the medulla causes the inferior esophageal sphincter to relax, and then the diaphragm and your abdominal muscles contract, and everything can go up the esophagus. Okay, now, if you're really, really sick, sometimes the contents of the small intestine, so things that are even more digested, can come up too, which that's bad. Okay, and I think that's the last slide.